Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Orth from the Los Alamos League of Women Voters Board. We are pleased today to have Angelica Gurule, the Sustainability Manager for Los Alamos County. She's going to be talking with us today about climate. Thank you very much, Ms. Gurule, for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see some familiar faces and meet a few new people as well. My name is Angelica Gurule, Sustainability Manager for Los Alamos County, and I've been in this role about 2 positions. It was created um, specifically for the role of helping the county establish its first greenhouse gas inventory and its first ever climate action plan. Um, so just a little bit about me. I've been with the county a little over 10 years now. I was previously their environmental services manager, so working on recycling and waste reduction initiatives and, just keep managing solid waste for our community. And then I was promoted into this role. So really happy for this opportunity and to share with you about the work that I've been doing these past 2 years. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to send a request to share. Okay, now it says I can share. So, alrighty. So here today just to share with you my work on the Climate Action Plan and give you an update. So at this point, you are going to get a, a synopsis of the work that we've been doing for the past 2 years. This is our project team. So I'm on the left. That's an old picture of me, probably closer to 10 years ago. And then our Deputy County Manager, Linda Madison, Abby Hayward, our conservation coordinator. So us three have been working on this project on a weekly basis from the county side. And then we have Andrea Martin, Alicia Fennell, and Jenna Decker, who the county hired Cascadia Consulting Group to assist us with this process. And then some sub-consultants with them were AMM, who helped us on our outreach and education components, and then Ben Gold from Eco Data Lab, who helped with the consumption-based greenhouse gas inventory. So our meeting goals today is to provide you all with the background and an overview on this development process for the Climate Action Plan. I'm going to give you some information about the greenhouse gas inventories that have been conducted, and then also talk to you about some of our emission reduction targets and some of the actions associated with this plan. And then we'll dive into next steps. What's next after, what are the next steps for this climate action plan process, including our final presentation to the County Council on the CAP. So we'll start with what is a climate action plan. So we call it a CAP, so just climate action plan equals CAP. And a CAP provides a strategic framework that offers an array of actions that can be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It typically will identify opportunities to increase climate resilience and adaptation strategies, such as enhancing resource conservation and preparing for impacts like extreme heat, extreme drought within the community. Typical focus areas for a CAP include mobility and transportation and land use, buildings and energy, waste and materials management, natural systems and water, and community resilience. So to begin our process, we started working on our greenhouse gas inventory. And for our methodology, the protocols we use, which are really important because it helps guide how a greenhouse gas inventory is conducted. and we used the US for the community-wide greenhouse gas inventory. We used the US Community Protocol. So that's an established protocol that's used throughout the United States when we're conducting our greenhouse gas inventories. And then for the consumption-based emission inventory, which is a very different type of inventory, those are, I guess I would say they're newer. It's a newer method to conducting an inventory. We worked with Eco Data Lab to use their cool climate approach and their unique modeling that they've established for conducting that inventory. And then for our local county government operations, we wanted to dive in and say, okay, how's the community performing? And then how is our local government performing in terms of emissions? So we used the local government operations protocol. So I'll jump into our inventories. So the first inventory we conducted was the community-wide geographic emissions inventory. So the community-wide looked at everything within our community, and I'll just say that we did not include Lano's emissions. We were able to find what their emissions were in a report that they had released, but just because the county really doesn't have jurisdiction over their emissions, it was determined just to leave them out of the study. And the study really, you want to take emissions to say, okay, how can we move the needle, right? We take an inventory of all the emissions we're generating, and we have the jurisdiction to reduce those emissions, through policies or education. So the community-wide emissions, which is all the emissions that are generated within our community. It's not like upstream emissions, like if it's not accounting for emissions of, say, for example, your groceries. It doesn't determine the emissions that it takes to, produce that food, ship that food. It doesn't account for that necessarily. It's just the emissions that are generated within our own community. So you look at natural gas and electricity that you're using at your own home to heat and cool your home. We looked at passenger and freight vehicles used within our community, solid waste, wastewater, and public transit. So as a community, we're generating approximately, almost 140,000 metric tons of emissions. And we use the 2022 baseline. And our largest emissions were from building energy and transportation. So we combined natural gas and electricity, and then also just to get us to that 55%, and then the freight vehicles or the transportation, which is 38%. So the takeaways after you realize where your emissions are coming from, that helps you to be able to focus in and say, we need to create actions that would help us to reduce emissions in those areas specifically. So in our case, we would want to focus on passenger and freight transportation, and then, building energy, which is a combination of both natural gas and electricity. So in this case, we would look at actions that would, support expanding sustainable transportation, such as biking, walking, and public transportation, right? Trying to take all of those vehicles off the roads, or at least reduce the amount of vehicles, right? So really looking at things that would expand on biking, walking, and public transport, and then expanding EV infrastructure and adoption. So that could look like, implementing more EV infrastructure, policies for the county to start buying more EV vehicles versus gasoline powered vehicles, and then increasing building energy efficiency. So that could come in the form of weatherization programs or building codes upgrades, and then increasing our renewable energy sources. So we know that in our county, utility department is working really hard to try to find expand our energy portfolio for renewable energy options. So then we took a closer look, right? We dove down a little bit deeper and said, all right, out of the community emissions, how much emissions is the county operations generating? So as a county, we're generating, approximately 15,000 metric tons. So that's about 11% of the total community-wide emissions. And our largest were also very similar to what the community's largest were. So again, it is in alignment with the transportation and the building energy, which is electricity and natural gas. And then the county's largest emissions subsources. So if you're looking at transportation, employee commute, we did a commuter survey, and we found that a large number of our emissions are coming from employees who live off the hill and commuting into the county. And then it's followed by electricity. So key takeaways here, right? If you're looking at the county, and key areas to reduce our emissions for the county is to reduce that employee commute. Well, that that's a hard policy to follow because we're a service-based organization. So a lot of our jobs require us to be here and be on site and provide a service. The county has allowed already for some work from home opportunities, for example, more administrative work where, you can do your job remotely, and telecommute and things like that. So that's a key area that, we'll continue to look at. Electricity consumption is a big one for the county, natural gas consumption, how we're heating and cooling our buildings, and then solid waste disposal and our vehicle fleet. So actions that the county, will look at as part of this will be to establish commuter trip reduction programs for our county employees. Work on decarbonizing our buildings and enhancing energy efficiency. So those again go back to building codes, weatherization. As we do renovations as a county, are we replacing them with more efficient windows and appliances and things like that? And then continue to work on reducing waste and increasing waste diversion opportunities. So that could come in the form of like a food composting program where it gives you another tool to keep your trash out of the landfill. And then shifting to lower carbon vehicle fleet and equipment. So that could look like right now the county has a policy to adopt at least 2 vehicles per year. So switching from natural gas or gas powered vehicles to electric vehicles. And this, as we continue to move forward with this climate action plan, the county could choose to revise that policy and, aim to purchase more electric vehicles. So as part of this process, then we have the greenhouse gas inventories. Now we look at all of that and we say, okay, now it's time to establish a target. And, what does that mean? So we know we have 140,000 metric tons as a community of carbon emissions. What is our target? How do we want to establish milestones to start to reduce our emissions? So, as part of this effort, we started working on establishing these targets. So we said, okay, so this people typically have a little bit of struggle with this graph just because it's unusual to see it, I guess, illustrated in this way, but it's what you call a wedge analysis. So on your y-axis, you'll see our greenhouse gas emissions, and it's, roughly at that 140,000 metric tons. And then on your x-axis is time. And what they did was they said, okay, how can we get as close to zero as possible, right? Based off of state goals, best practices, current policies that are in place, like how can we start moving that needle to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? So the red line, the red wedge, is all of the reductions in emissions that we'll see from current state and national policies and programs. So if the county didn't do a thing just based off current clean car rules and the building codes that the state has adopted, all of these different things will start to lead. That'll take us down, just it looks like about 60,000 metric tons on my side. We'll just say roughly about there. So that'll help us to really move the needle to about half, right? But if you then, the rest of these items, like in the blue, all the way down to the dotted line, are strategies that the county has or that we've worked on throughout this process with Cascadia to help us to move the rest of the way down, right? What can the county do to take those next steps and really move the needle to zero? So that's, I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but that would be a mixture of building energy codes, adopting commuter reduction programs, really reducing our waste, and then on top of that, adding carbon sequestration onto that. So by really expanding like our urban tree canopy. So I know it's a little confusing, but you just kind of have to think about it backwards. So we can come back to that if you have any questions. So that this is our current target is to reduce our emissions 88% by 2050. We're really saying zero by 2050, but there's 12% in there that we would really need to, depend on other state policy, state and national policies and programs, just technology, right? Like we know that as time goes by, there'll be hopefully more renewable energy options, better energy efficient windows, higher performing vehicles, that are more efficient. So as time goes on, we'll start to see more and more of that to help us get to that zero or carbon neutrality by 2050. So our CAP actions, right? So now we have a target and we start to develop actions that would help us to meet that target. So we developed CAP actions and we developed those by, again, conducting the greenhouse gas inventories. We did a lot of community survey and community engagement throughout this process. I didn't really talk about this in my plan that I'm showing you here today, but at every step of the way, we are working with the public. We had community surveys, we had community meetings, we invited them to all of our meetings. We attended county farmers markets, summer concerts. So we really tried to make sure the community was aware that this was happening and gathering their input and integrating it into this plan. We also did a baseline of policy assessments. So Felicia's here. She was telling me she was part of the Clean Car initiative. So we looked at clean car, right there, and modeled those policies in alignment with our goals. We also looked at climate action best practices. What are other practices that are being done in other communities that we could adopt here? And then we worked with the board, we worked with the county staff and county council to get feedback and revise this plan to reflect our own community values and the voices of our community members. Take a drink of my tea. So our focus areas for this plan, we've seen, right, that the majority of our emissions are coming from buildings and energy, which is the gas and the electricity, and then transportation. So those are our top two that you see there. And then we're going to hone in as well on waste management, which is the materials and the consumption. Consumption just means what are we buying, right? What are we consuming on a daily basis? Big screens and cars and phones and, how are we consuming? So we focused on that as well. Natural systems and water. So, are we are we being mindful of our urban green space? Are we conserving our water resources? We definitely want to make sure we're um, incorporating those resilience pieces and adaptation strategies as well. And then just what is, although you maybe can't directly reduce emissions by um, enhancing community understanding of climate change, it's still really important to talk about it and realize that as a community, we need to make these changes together. So, those are also part of our strategies. And then the cross-cutting just means like, how can we start to involve more? How can the county work with the lab, even though we don't have direct jurisdiction over their emissions or the schools? And how can we really start just to promote climate education throughout our community? So those are some of the focus areas and the strategies for the plan. And then on the right-hand side, you see some of the actions. So I won't go through all of these, but we'll look a little bit at buildings and energy. So some of our actions that we will propose to council as part of this plan will be to encourage energy efficiency and electrification retrofits for our community members. We did hear from our community that they do not want mandates. They do not want anything that is like punitive, or they want the ability to make those decisions on their own. So that was a major change in the plan. We had our original draft that said, um, just more strict about things, I guess. So we had to redo the plan, and we removed any sort of mandates that would impact local residents directly. So we did keep those mandates in place for the county operations. So the county could be a leader as we start to move forward in this process. Um, so, we kept words like encourage and educate. So we will encourage as a county for residents to do energy efficiency and electrification retrofits, but we do not want to mandate that. Um, Expand electric energy resiliency. And then on the transportation side, developing an EV infrastructure plan, encouraging multimodal transportation. Um, so those are areas that we'll focus on as part of the climate action plan. So our next steps, it's really interesting because it took us so long to work on this, but then we just condense it down to, a short presentation and a short document. But our next steps will be to present the final cap to the Environmental Sustainability Board on November 7th. So that's this coming Thursday. And really the point of that is really to ask for their support, just to, strengthen and show the community support on this plan before we present it to council. So I don't have any reason to believe they wouldn't support the plan, but that would be, that's going to them for their approval on Thursday. And then we'll also be presenting the final cap to county council on November 12th. So that's the following Tuesday. So in about 2 weeks. And this will be a big step for council to review the final product. The last time they heard from us, we were in the draft stage. So they'll get to see all the final changes that were made. And, it's an exciting time for the county. It's taken us a long time to get here and to really, I think the county has always done really good things to try to be greener, try to care for our environment. We have one of the best recycle programs in the state. We have one of the best transport, free public transit systems in the state. So we've done all those things. Right now, it's just really focused our efforts and given us a plan to say, okay, we are really going to work towards, achieving our goals and our targets. So, and then with their acceptance and their direction, we would be able to start implementing some of the CAP actions and strategies that I was talking to you about before. So, like I mentioned, we started this I guess a year and a half ago. So we started in summer. We did all of this work in between that you're just seeing in a little nutshell, but we'll be presenting the final cap on November 12th. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Mhm. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Uh, are there questions from anyone on the platform relating to the climate action plan? Please unmute yourself. You may certainly show yourself.
Hi,
Um, uh,
Jody.
Hi, Angelica. Something that I think is, there are several things you said that are really important. One that's encouraging is working with the lab to reduce, as you said, our biggest climate impact, which is transportation of land employees who don't live on the hill. And the second thing that I think is really fun and that we could get a whole lot of help on from students is carbon sequestration by increasing tree cover. So something that the league working on protecting open space, that's one of our positions. That would be a fun one to work on. And maybe we could have like you have the trash pickup, maybe we could have a tree day established through peak. But those are the most fun things that you said that I learned. Oh, and I'm also sorry that we're not mandating people to do stuff. I know nobody wants to be mandated, but the thing is, nobody wanted to not smoke in public and around kids, and nobody wanted to do seatbelts. But those two are real safety issues that have impacted our whole culture positively. So sorry, we're going to miss that. Maybe we can talk to the council about that.
thank you, Jody.
Well,
Oh,
Um,
and thank you.
I'll
This is
just
great. Thank
respond
you.
to that by saying, I think we've had a great success in the county by not having to mandate. And it goes to show, like with our recycle program, when other people ask, what mandates do you have in place? What policies do you have in place? We don't have any. We have a program and we educate and we give the people the right tools, our citizens. And it's a very successful program. I think we have, probably about last time I checked, 85% participation with a decently low contamination rate. So we've also been able to really move the mark by not mandating and by educating and providing the right tools. So I didn't mention that as part of this, but we will be pursuing lots of incentives, incentive programs, and tools that would help the residents to make those right decisions. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Susie, did you have a question?
you're mute.
You're
Did
muted.
It was going to be about the mandates as well. And I hear
Okay.
you. I hope we can be successful. I guess my question would be, do you recall, Angelica, in the survey feedback and other ways you received input, what percentage of people were resistant to mandates? And did anybody say they would like to have mandates? Has there been a loud voice in support of mandates?
I would say it was a louder voice to remove the mandates. And
Um,
but for council, I
okay, yeah. So, yeah, because, I get so worried sometimes about making policies and decisions based on a few vocal people's
right.
input. And so and it's because generally people don't, when they're kind of happy or content with how things are, they're not going to comment. But people who aren't happy about something are going to be loud on lots of different topics. So I just hate to miss an opportunity because a small percentage were no mandates, no, don't want mandates on anything, right?
The
And we're
one
looking
thing that we did
here.
keep, Susie, in the plan that will be implemented, universally through our community is we kept in the action that talks about adopting green building codes. So, depending on what those, and clearly that's a process in itself, right? Like developing the codes and adopting them, but that would be an opportunity then, to adopt codes that would be applied universally, not just an education tool, but throughout. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm really hoping that we can do that soon. And that would be for new construction and I guess permits for remodels, possibly, right?
right.
Or retrofits, etc.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm glad you're at the helm because you're kind of a very balanced person and you're open to all kinds of input. So I think I think you're a good personality style for this role.
Thank you, Susie. And I know you're probably gonna have a ton of questions, so please let me know them before council so I can
Yeah,
prepare.
I will. To be fair, I will work on that. I'm gonna make that a to-do list item.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Any
Hey,
question
Rebecca?
I just asked,
Becky,
I'll probably ask again. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
I have it noted.
Thanks.
Becky,
You're muted.
There we go. Is that okay? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Um, I started by saying I agree with Susie that it's really hard to know what people really think and how. I think it's a question of degree. If you say, okay, you got to do whatever it is and it's something difficult, then okay. But your point about green buildings, that's not so difficult, I would think. Okay, that was just a comment in response to Susie's question, which I think is a tricky one. But I had a question about the funny looking graph. Um, it shows that business as usual will help hugely. And I don't quite understand how that could be. So
So
please.
what they look at is they say, okay, based on current state policies. So like a recent one, right? It's fairly new, Felicia, is the clean car rule. It was maybe adopted like the past year, year and a half, something like that. So that rule says, by 20, and I don't know the rule offhand, but let's just use, for example, by 2040 or 2025, 10% of all the cars need to be EV in the state. And then by 2030, 50%. And by 2040, 100%. So there's this policy in place that's going to drive the retailers of EV or cars in our state to be producing more energy efficient cars or selling energy efficient. So they're saying that policy, they apply that to our state and say, okay, well, that policy already is going to help us to move the needle and reduce emissions just because by nature they're more fuel efficient, etc. Then they like another policy they looked at was the county's IRP. So, and they have goals that say, they're trying to be a carbon neutral electric provider by 2040. So that helps move the needle as well. So just by current policies alone, we're able to start reducing that needle. That's saying though, right, that we are actually going to implement those policies. So we are going to hit the 2040 carbon neutral goal and we are going to abide by the clean car rule. So, that's the thought process behind that, if that's helpful at all.
No, that makes sense. In other words, those are policies that you didn't just suddenly adopt. Those are what? State regulations,
Yes,
national
state
regulations?
and local. Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
And what was IRP? Sorry.
The IRP is, the Board of Public Utilities. They have an
Yes.
integrated resource plan, that
Okay.
has goals to become a carbon neutral electric provider by 2040. So they're trying to reduce their carbon emissions from electricity, right? So that'll help to move the needle as well and get us, reduce our emissions.
So that's the source of our energy,
Right,
not what we use it on, but the source.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So instead of using coal fire power plants, right, we're going to really try to get clean renewable energy like solar, like the Foxtel Flats, solar
right.
array that they're working on, and then others. So,
Okay, that's great. So the county is doing it from two directions. You and the Department of Public Utilities.
Right, from all directions and following
Yeah.
other state initiatives as well.
Okay, that's great. Now I see why that graph might look that way. It just looked like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen without doing anything. But actually, you're doing a lot. We are.
Thank you. Thank you for your question too. Appreciate that. You guys are
Thank you.
helping me get ready for my big presentation, so ask all the hard questions.
All right. Are there other questions for Angelica? Unmute yourself, turn on your camera if you'd like. No? All right. Well, thank you so much. As you know, a recording. Oh, wait, we have a taker. Jody, do you have another comment or question?
No, I do, but I was just going to wave goodbye and thank Angelica for the presentation.
All right. I see Charlie. Charlie, do you have a comment or a question? No. Okay.
They're all just
Great.
waving by.
All right.
Nice.
So
Like that.
thank you very much. And there's our co-host, Ellen. This recording will be made part of the League's YouTube channel, so look for it after Ed Santiago uploads it. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.